Welcome to the Beyond the Lines podcast. In a world filled with so much division, we want to do something about that. We all have these lines that we draw in the sand where we say we can't listen beyond that line, we can't understand somebody on the other side of that line, we can't even love somebody on the other side of the line. We want to do something about that. We want to open up our hearts, open up our minds to be able to love everyone, no matter what line has been drawn in our lives, even if we're unaware of it. Our goal is to treat people all with the dignity that they deserve, even if we disagree with them. My name is Jonathan Miller, and I'm one of your designated listeners on this podcast. And today, I have my other two co-listeners with me. Today, we have DJ Hayward. Welcome.
Hey. What's up?
Good to have you. Good to have you. And I have Clayton Edelman.
That's right. Hey, guys.
So good to have you guys. Yeah. Today is a special episode. We're going to be doing a Thanksgiving special where we are going to be talking about, this is the best idea I could come up with for Thanksgiving. And I hope you like it because I'm curious to learn from the fellow guys here and what we're learning. So what I would like to do with this episode is basically, what are we thankful for learning this year that we didn't know otherwise? And just speaking for myself, this has been one of the biggest years of learning that I've had in a very long time, of just perspectives that I didn't even know existed before, which seems sad, and it is. But also, like, I've gone to like graduate school and all that, and this year has been a crazy year for me, just in learning. I've been reading a lot, and it's just been insane. And I'm sincerely grateful for the place I'm in today, because it's been a really tough year for my family, and I share that for their podcast as well. And it's been really wild. But for some reason, within the midst of that chaos, I've been able to learn a lot. So maybe that's how God works. I don't know. But we haven't talked beforehand. We don't know what each other have learned this year, what we're grateful for learning. And so I'm really curious to hear what y'all have learned as well. So I'm hoping to be a really fun podcast.
Yeah.
Let's dive in.
Yeah.
For me personally, I've got like a long commute to our church and whatnot. And so I find myself learning a lot of times either from podcasts and the occasional audiobook. Yeah. But, it's fun to re-listen to episodes we've gone through. And one of the episodes I listened to recently, again, was the one with David Walensky.
Yeah.
And I've got a personal, just like David and I, we're BFFs here at the office. I love hanging out with David, and so shout out to you, David, wherever you're at.
Let's see if he listens to this.
Yeah, we'll see. David, give me the sign, next time I see you. Yeah. But so I just loved listening to his podcast, and I've been thinking about it, and just knowing his story and like what he's gone through has helped me just think about how we deal with addiction. In terms of just anything, whether it's, hey, I've got sexual addiction going on, or there's, food or substance abuse. There's stuff, that's come up where, at our men's elevator or whatnot, you've got guys who are saying, hey, like, this is kind of some of the stuff I'm working through it and I want to walk through it. How do I do this? And so it's moments like that where I've got to say, hey, like, I'm able to have these conversations of, okay, hey, well, what do you want to do for yourself? Where do you see yourself at the end of this? And stuff like the podcast with David that has been really helpful. But one of the kind of tying in with addiction or whatnot, that got me started on this kind of rabbit hole of, a big thing with addiction is this idea of dopamine and, the chemical in your brain that just fires off whenever you do something fun. You get that notification from a message or, if you think slot machine, you hear that sound, like the dopamine comes, eat a good bite of food, dopamine. So I read this book called Dopamine Nation. I listened to it actually. I'll pull up the author's name here in just a sec. Dr. Anna Lemke. But I think it's really helpful for me personally, just to even think about myself and just how I consume stuff. And one of the big things she talks about is that there's almost like an oversaturation of like when you've got so much going on, so many options and so much to choose from that like it almost gets overwhelming. And then it's just kind of like it creates those tendencies. And so as I was listening to this book, I was like thinking about, man, like how many times do I check my phone, or do I feel the tendency or the need just to even look at my watch or do something? So for me, that book really helped me dial things back to where it's like, okay, maybe I'm not going through a drug addiction, but there's addictions that are so, every day, like, hey, I'm going to check my phone, going to check my email, or do these other things. Or even like the simple stuff, like just wanting to be distracted while doing things. So example, if I'm like watching a movie, my wife and I try and just like put everything down. Like, no, like I'm here just to watch the movie. Like if I go to the movie theater, I pay money and I'm going to sit there and just watch the movie. But when I'm at home, it's like so many distractions. How can I multitask? Like what can I be reading at the same time? So for me, that book was really, or that audiobook was super helpful in just like peeling things back. Like, okay, maybe I don't need to overstimulate myself. And I even like thought about, with like coffee or caffeine. Like I love coffee. I think a lot of people do.
Careful.
I know, right? But just kind of thinking like, okay, man, like, do I really need this much coffee or this much caffeine or whatnot? So yeah, that's kind of something I've been walking through past few months. I would say since Elevate, I started listening to it on that drive down.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What do you think? What has been the hardest thing to kind of pull back from?
Definitely the caffeine.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Because I mean, like, so like even like if I go on a run in the morning, like it's 5 o'clock, it's dark, and I'm exhausted. So it's like, man, what's the first thing I go to? It's like, okay, make the cup of coffee or drink like a pre-workout or something. And so trying to quitting that cold turkey, I think would be really hard, obviously.
Yeah.
But just something for me to be like, okay, how about I dial it back and not have this much? Because, I even see like just how jittery it makes me or sometimes anxious or whatnot.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And what do you think is the biggest, like when you think about the dopamine nation, what was the biggest revelation for you inside of that?
Probably just the overstimulating and not really recognizing, because it's so second nature for us, right? Like to be sitting on the couch and then, hey, I'm just going to pull up my phone too and like see what's happening on this social feed. Or
my wife will make fun of me. Sometimes we'll be watching a show together and she's like, I had to go to the bathroom. And then she'll come back. It's like, you thought you could watch a whole TikTok while I went to the bathroom. It's like, I didn't even think about the fact that I did that. Like on my phone, I was watching, like I'm at halfway on a TikTok and she's like, really? You
totally.
couldn't wait.
Yeah. That's a big thing, is just like the need to want to just pull something out and just be stimulated in that moment. And so you're asking like, hey, what's the biggest thing? And it's definitely hard, but like just trying to let myself be bored, because when I went to college at U of A, and I would like track how far I would walk every day. And I would walk on average like close to 8 miles for all my classes. Yeah. But I think then that was when I just got into the habit of like, okay, headphones in and just going to listen to music or listen to a podcast. And it's that idea of like, need to be stimulated, like I'm doing something, need to be occupied. But maybe now instead it's like, hey, like I walk to my car, I park it at an electric charger away from our apartment. Yeah. And so it's like, maybe I don't need to listen to a podcast on that 10-minute walk. Like I can just walk in silence and just be with my thoughts.
That's so interesting. I was recently just having this thought, like, overstimulating, always like having my phone on, or even like you can't even do, to the point where it's almost like I can't even do regular simple things without having some type of stimulation. Or and I found myself like, I really had just thought really recently, I don't think anymore. You know what I mean? Like I'm listening to so much stuff, or I'm engaging in so much stuff. I'm not, and I think about that thing, but not having like true time to like let your thoughts kind of wander and kind of like allow myself to, I don't know what's the word. Not like allow myself, not necessarily problem solve, but kind of work through my thoughts. It's always like jumping into the next thing or listening to this, sports podcast or, and so not really ever taking the time just to be with my thoughts. And it really hit me like one morning I was getting up to do my devotions, and it was like, man, I just was feeling really distracted. I know it's because I probably look at my my phone, before I start, diving into my devotion time. It's like my brain is so, I'm starting to stimulate my brain when, man, I need to allow myself to be quiet. So I think that's been really challenging for me too, just to be like, hey man, like it's okay just to relax and be bored. Like what you're saying.
Or even like there's a lot of healing that can take place and in reflection when you allow yourself to be in this reflective place. And I think it's even sometimes, I think maybe like older generations, like we're always reading newspapers. That's like the trope, right? Where you'd see the dad at the breakfast table with a newspaper. You know, that used to be it. Now it's everybody's on their phone.
Yep.
You know, it's been around, like always feeling this need to have new information instead of like processing your own stuff. Recently, I've been going to therapy, and just to be like super vulnerable for a second, I have this like traumatic event in my life where a neighbor kid like molested me and my brother. And so that used to be, I've just been doing this therapy very recently. That used to be the most painful memory for me to go back into because of the deep shame that I had associated with that and how I viewed myself for the last, 22 years or something. And my therapist says, what we're going to do is this technique where you're just going to think about the memory. And I'm like, this is not going to work. This is stupid. Like, you're going to use my 50 minutes of therapy for me to sit in my chair and just think silently with no other distractions. And the only thing he did was say, okay, he asked me to say a few sentences about what I'm thinking about. And then he'd say, okay, go with that, as long as I was on that track. And the wild thing is, I've like, just because of like 2 sessions of that, I'm still like, I was skeptical beforehand. I'm still skeptical afterwards, even though it worked, right? Like, I was able to go into that memory and process the emotion, the deep, crazy emotions that I had with that memory, and bring it out of the emotional part of my brain and bring it into this place where I could process it and think about it in this silence and in this space. And in that, I was able, like, I didn't want to do it, but in that, I was able to realize, like, oh wait, all these years of my life, I've been saying I'm the guilty one, and there's lots of things with the memory that go with that, but like, I'm innocent, like that. I had the realization, and like my wife, I've told her about this, and she's like, yeah, like, but to me, that was a massive revelation because I refused to go back into that memory because it was painful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now that I did, I can talk about it on a podcast. It's absolutely wild, the space that when you give yourself space to find that healing space, I just love it. Like what you're talking about, like space can bring so much healing when we allow ourselves to have the silence to think about. And I just had like the other day, yesterday or something, I had some feedback on a video I made. And I had this immediate like anxiety about it. And this has nothing to do with like the past memory, but I was like, my first usual reaction is like, okay, ignore the emotion, ignore the fact that this hurts.
Right.
They like ignore that, and then usually what happens is the emotion is still there. I'm just not thinking about it, and I just start getting angry, and I'm like making all these defenses and blah blah blah. And I realized I'm gonna try that thing where I sit and think about how I'm feeling. I'm gonna try to name it. I'm gonna try to think about it. Why am I feeling this way? And that disarmed me. Like, I just spent a little time, instead of ignoring the emotion, like just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, man.
Yeah. No, I know that's not easy.
Yeah.
Sharing,
Thanks for sharing that.
even the details.
Yeah.
But I appreciate it.
Yeah. No. Like I said, like I don't understand how it works or that it works, but I am like a different person with that memory. Like it's wild.
Yeah.
This has been a weird year for me.
I think it's been a weird year for a lot of us.
Yeah.
So you're not alone in that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Can I ask you how, like, in your reflections about like addiction, about the dopamine thing, how has that helped you like love other people better?
I mean, maybe in the cheesiest way, like it's helped me love myself a little bit better.
Yeah.
If that makes more sense. Like trying to have those moments of just silence or not stimulation, like, because, we were chatting before we started recording this, and I was saying, like, this has been a hard year for me reading-wise, like, and I've shared this with other people, I was at a lunch with my grandpa and my dad, and I was like, yeah, like, I'm not reading a lot this year, and that's not like me, and so I think this whole idea of not trying to overstimulate has helped me, like, even look at my phone and just be like, my wife and I were just talking about this last Sunday, I was like, I think I'm just going to delete, like, a ton of apps off my phone. And only have stuff that is going to be beneficial for me. Like maybe I'll just have, if I want to pick up my phone and read, like, okay, it's the Bible app or my Kindle app. Like you got to read something that's going to be just beneficial for you. And so, yeah, I think in the cheesiest way, like Dopamine Nation maybe helped me love myself the best.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I would assume that it'll probably make, as we learn how to take a step back, we get to be in the moment with people better.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Like watching a show with our spouse or hanging out, with our kids or whatever, being able to be okay with being in that moment and enjoying everything about the moment. Because I think that, when I'm distracting myself or when I'm, consuming something from a screen or not paying attention to the world around me, I'm missing the beauty of God's creation. From the people that he's put in front of me up to his, to the trees or the flowers or whatever. We don't have flowers here. It's Arizona. Let's be honest. We have
some cactus.
Yeah, we have some cactus flowers. Cacti flowers. But no, like just being able to say, hey, I'm in the moment and I'm able to be aware of the people around me, and especially like, seeing people who are in need. I think about we had Jamie Winship on the podcast a few months ago, whatever, and he didn't tell this story on the podcast, but he always tells a story about just being aware of the work that God is doing around you. He tells a story about how when he gets on an airplane, he just prays, hey God, like what work are you doing and can I help? And that just really convicted me, because like how many times do I walk in an airplane or in a grocery store or whatever, and I'm just like, hey, I want to block everyone else out, rather than saying, hey, this is God's creation, and what are some of the ways that God, you can use me, whether that be a smile, helping, somebody with their cart or whatever it is. When I'm distracted, I'm not able to see those things. Yeah. I'm only consumed with the things, either the screen or things that are in front of me, rather than the larger picture of life that's going on around me. And I just miss that. So
yeah, no, that's so true. And I think the being present is the most important part. And I almost am jealous, but also wonder, like, what were people distracted with in Jesus's time? Like, you got all the disciples hanging out with Jesus. Like, what would be pulling their attention away from him? And so I would say we definitely live with more distractions now, but I don't know. Jesus was consistently present with the people he was with, and if I want to be more like Jesus, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. And technology can be a barrier to that for sure, unless you're watching our podcast, in which case it is not.
Yeah.
Viewers are like taking out their headphones as they're walking. Maybe I don't need
the last episode.
We'll see a drop off at this timestamp right here.
Oh man. That's awesome. Yeah. How about you, DJ? Like, what new things are you learning and have learned this year that you're thankful for?
I mean, it's been so much.
Yeah.
I mean, like so much. But one of the things that I think I've just been on this journey over the last year, so really the last few months, has been this idea of how do I build my character, and it really comes from a kind of a controversial podcast. It's called The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill.
Yeah.
Really controversial. I'm not here to comment about the podcast or whatever that means for the church. But one thing that it did for me, it just really pointed out like how important it is to continue to build your character as my leadership grows, as my influence grows, as I seek to grow in my walk with Jesus. I have to continue to build my insides. And so one of the things that I've just been really challenged with, and this is something that, that gets brought up in that podcast, is allowing other people to speak into my life. And so, and really like put myself in situations where I am asking questions of like, hey, how do I continue to build who I am, or what are some blind spots that I have in my life? And so I've reached out to a couple of guys who I respect, and we have Tom Parker here at our on staff at our church who's just, I mean, that's kind of his whole wheelhouse, is to kind of help us as pastors and staff to kind of build us as people. And so he's been really influential in my life, but also other people like Jeff McGee, who we had on this. Yeah. We had Jeff McGee on here. Jeff McGee, who is an incredible guy. Yeah. And so just inviting people to say, okay, here, I'm ahead of you. And so here are some things that you need to look out for. Here's the things that you need to watch for. Here's the things that you need to learn. Here's the things that I'm going to challenge you with. And so I'm really, it's been really interesting of how, you know, something that was a very negative situation, you know, what happened up at, you know, at that church, you know, which the podcast kind of lays out, has really been a challenge to me. And I'll tell you the moment in which it really hit me. So in one of the earlier episodes, they were talking about this kind of like, in a nutshell, kind of like some arrogance and stuff like that, and thinking that you're right. And so I was planning something, and one of the things I was planning, and one of the comments I made was like, well, you know, like, we're just going to go, or why can't we just make this decision and, you know, people can get over it. And then I had that thought in my head as I was listening to it. I was like, oh my gosh, I am doing the same thing. Like I can be really just as arrogant or as prideful as anyone else in my life. And what really scared me about it was I didn't even realize it. I didn't even realize I was being that in the moment until it was kind of pointed out to me through that example in the podcast. And it was just really mind blowing to be like, wow, like if I am not purposefully seeking out my blind spots or continue to ask questions about how I can grow, man, I'm going to be on my own dangerous path. And it may not look like other people's. It may not look like how Mars Hills look like, you know, in how they detail in the podcast. It may not look like that, but my own version is detrimental to other people. And so as I'm not, if my character isn't built, as I'm put in, you know, places, you know, being a pastor, you know, and influencing people and leading people, leading my family, I have to continually be challenging myself on doing that. That has really put me on this journey to start seeking out guys who I really respect. Yeah. People who I really respect to kind of help me grow.
For sure. Yeah. What that reminds me of is a book I've read this year called Think Again. It's by Adam Grant. And his whole premise for the entire book is this idea of like, all of us, every human has places in their lives where they're wrong. And so how can we put ourselves in a position where we're able to listen and learn something new, and think again about something? And he says, part of the problem, this is a quote, part of the problem is cognitive laziness. Some psychologists point out that we're mental misers. We often prefer the ease of hanging on to old views over the difficulty of grappling with new ones. Yet there are also deeper forces behind our resistance to rethinking. Questioning ourselves makes the world more unpredictable. It requires us to admit the facts that we may have changed, and what was once right may now be wrong. Reconsidering something we believe deeply can threaten our identities, making it feel as if we're losing a part of ourselves. And it's not only like learning something new, it's like I might lose a part of myself because I've so deeply believed in this thing. I could either choose to accept like, oh, I was wrong about that and lose a part of myself, which is really scary, or continue to follow the path that is actually wrong in the first place. But that's way harder. It's way harder to admit like I'm wrong, because it could actually be admitting that I have to give up something that I've held on to as a piece of who I am for years. I mean, it's not just like accepting new facts, you know, it's bigger than that. It's so much tougher. And yeah, it also is fascinating. He says the less intelligent we are in a particular domain, the more we seem to overestimate how intelligent we are in that domain. So like we can really think we're smart in something, in reality, if you think you're smart in something, sometimes that means you don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And I know that from personal experience.
Yep. All I know is that I know nothing.
Yeah.
That's it.
I know nothing
Yeah, I love that, DJ.
about anything.
Yeah, I know nothing about anything. I know one thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
No, I think that's really good. I think it's just so easy. The term was cognitive laziness. Is that what it was?
Cognitive laziness.
I think it's just so easy, when we think about the dopamine hits and social media, like it's just so easy to get in our own echo chambers where we're just reinforcing the ideas. How when we receive a perspective or a view that is different than ours, our brain actually reacts as if someone is physically trying to harm us. And so that's just a really interesting this perspective that I gain is like, man, my brain is going to react in a way to try to protect me, based on my past experiences and traumas and all that kind of stuff. But being okay with kind of pushing through that and see what's on the other side. It could be so easy for us to be lazy, and I'm guilty of that. And I think we see that play out in so many different ways, and polarization, in our country and politics and everything like that, where you could just so get bogged down in what you believe, which then therefore makes everyone who believes different than you an enemy, which is kind of like the basis of what we're trying to do here. Like, because I believe something different than you doesn't make me an enemy of yours. It just makes me different than you. And it can be easy for us to receive someone else's perspective as a threat to our way of life. And man, I think we've seen that in so many ways. I think we've seen that in Christianity and in nationalism. Just saying like, hey, like we like putting our nation as equal to Jesus. We've seen that there. And it's really probably all based off of a fear that what I have right now in my life could go away. And because it's going to go away, it's a bad thing. Rather than what you're kind of, and what the author kind of wrote was like, it probably will be hard, but it doesn't mean it'll be, necessarily a bad thing. And so I think that we all struggle with that. I know I struggle with it, especially with other things.
Well, and I think too, when you're talking about, you hear a perspective or a side of the story that you never even knew before, your immediate reaction is like, one, like you take it negatively, like, no, like it's almost an attack on you, or it's just like disbelief, like, wait, really? That's true? And I know you were going to talk about this a little bit, but even our most recent episode that Jonathan did, the Indigenous perspective episode with the Sunders. But even hearing them talk about the boarding schools, for me, that was something I didn't know anything about. And I was like, wait, really? Like, this is history. This is true. That was eye-opening, but I don't know what you were going to talk about specifically with their episode.
I think the one thing that was, and I had conversations with them before, but I think what was really eye-opening about, what they said on the podcast, it was like, man, there's just so many things about people in my community, the Native American community, that I just have no idea about, that I am ignorant to, and what I don't want to be is willfully ignorant. And I think that could be a part of what this cognitive laziness is talking about too, is like, we get a new information, and instead of diving a little bit deeper into what, what they talked about and their story and the things that are hurting them, and how now some of this trauma is being brought up, this ancestral kind of trauma is being brought up, especially as they're ready to have a child. And man, like, wow, like I should care about that, because I care about those people, and I care about my community, and those people from that background, from that demographic are in my community. And it's such a story that it gets blown over. So for me, the most thing was like, the biggest thing from hearing their story was like, man, well, what else can I learn? And then understanding that, man, like where they're coming from comes from a history of, in a background that I don't understand. And if I call, if I say that I care about my community and I care about people, I should want to learn about their perspective, even if I don't understand. I may not understand where they're coming from, but I can learn a little something about their perspective. And they talked about the tribal lands and And you know, earlier today I was like looking up some of the Gila River stuff that Mikhail, I think Mikhail, that Mikhail was mentioning. I was like, man, like I had no idea. I'm not from Arizona, number one, so I definitely don't know. And where I'm from, like the Native American community is not really as prevalent as it is out here, or not in the way that I grew up. It wasn't. And so like just being able to see like, wow, like there's something different going on. There's a narrative that is different than the one that I may be assuming.
Yeah.
And so like, what does that mean?
Absolutely. And that's been my biggest growth area this year in learning. And I'm just so thankful for it, because I'll tell you, a year and a half ago, I didn't know anything about Black history. And I knew that there was slavery in the U.S. I barely knew anything about it at all. I didn't know anything about the indigenous story in the U.S. and what happened to native tribes when colonization happened. Didn't know anything about it. And I had been taught my whole life that the Christians' biggest giant enemy in the world is Islam. And that basically all is Islam is just personified in the Taliban. That's what these are all things that I didn't know about or believed and was told. And it's like, as I've read this year, I'm like, this is all wrong. And one, how did I not know about this? How did I not know about this? Nobody taught me. Nobody said anything to me, not from the groups I was from. And then I'm reading like a book, it's called I Am Malala, about this girl whose name is Malala, and she stood up against the Taliban.
Yeah, she's a girl that survived, right? Yeah.
And she's Muslim, but she stood up, and her book is all about like, these guys, this is not Islam. Taliban is not Islam. We're against the Taliban here. I am standing up because the Quran doesn't say anything about women not having education. It doesn't say anything about that. And so I want every woman and girl to have the opportunity for education. I'm like, this is amazing. Like this girl who doesn't believe in Jesus is like personifying him. Like this is amazing. Like I highly recommend that book. And then like learning, I've read a few books about Native American history and what's going on in the what's gone on. And I think often like people who are from my background, from my upbringing, they'll say like, stop telling me all this stuff. I don't want to be ashamed of who I am. And I'm like, I don't feel ashamed or guilty for these things, but I do feel like I need to know them. Like, I'm not going to ignore this. This is history. This is where we're from. And it has real impacts on the way the world is today and our country is today. Yeah. And so I don't necessarily feel guilt or shame for these things, but I do feel deep, deep sadness for the evil that our country has been built on in many, many ways. Yeah. And it's just so ironic to me that our country is built on this like religious freedom. Like people came over from Europe to come to America for religious freedom. You hear that all over the place. And yet when they came, they destroyed indigenous people's culture because they believed them as heretics and they didn't believe in Christianity. And it's like, this is hypocritical. Like religious freedom, but not for them. They don't get to believe in what they believe because we believe this, but we're getting religious freedom, just not for you. You're heretics. You deserve to die. Right. It's like, what? Like they felt happy that the disease killed all the coast, like a lot of the 90% of the coastland native population and like smallpox and all, because they're like, oh, that's God bringing his judgment upon you, instead of being like, these are human beings. Right. They just saw them as animals. And it's just like, how did I not know this? Like how did, and sometimes you just don't know these things until you step out.
Yeah. And I think one of the, things that you talk about is like putting yourselves in proximity with people who come from, those stories. Like, and for one of the things that you reminded me of is one of the things that we got to do was we got to go meet with some members of a local mosque, and they came to our to our church, and we got to hang out with them and eat with them and share stories with them and hear about their families. And then we had a really honest dialogue about stereotypes that we thought about one another. Ask them really, really hard questions. And at the end of it, man, it was so many of us just standing around talking with one another and realizing, hey, like, we may believe something different than you, but that doesn't mean I can't love you well, and can't try to take the time to understand your context. And man, that's probably one of the most eye-opening things I did this year. That now that you remind me that, like, just being able to sit, with people who are different than I am, come from a different culture. Many of them came from different countries, and was able to ask really hard questions about, why do Christians hate us so much?
Yeah.
And it was like, man, like that really
so
hurts.
Real.
That you're identifying the word Christian with hate, when that is the exact opposite of what Jesus came for. Like we're supposed to be known, when you hear the word Christian, you're supposed to be known for love. And we have, as Christians, like, in our history, we've done a really bad job of promoting that fact about who we're supposed to be. And, we can't change that in totality right now, but we can do as individuals, as you are, if you're listening to us, as you are interacting with people in your life, like, what are you going to be known for? And hopefully you're known by the love of Jesus that's shining through you, right? So
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, John, going back to just some of the history that you were talking about and learning, I've yet to finish this book. I think I'm on like chapter 3, but it's called The Color of Compromise by Jamar Timsby.
It's really good.
Yeah, you guys read it?
Yeah.
But even just the first few chapters going through the history of
it's wild.
Colonization, and I believe it even touches like into Christopher Columbus and like some of his notes or whatnot. But yeah, that has been like incredibly wild reading that, and just like, wow, like, we hear about it, we learned about it in grade school probably, just, everything that happened, but we didn't hear all the details that kind of this book goes into. So yeah, that has been a book that I'm processing right now, and like, all right, what can I do to learn more and to be a better Christian? Because like you said, we can't change the perception necessarily of, Christians entirely, but we can help in the small interactions we have with the people we know and deal with on the day-to-day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we're going to wrap it up here. we have so much that I've learned today or this year, and you guys have as well. But I'm so grateful for that. It has not been easy. Mm-hmm. Like I can't make that more clear. Like there has been many books I've read this year that have shown the shortcomings in myself and the shortcomings in my perspective and how I viewed the world up till now. It has not been easy. It's been painful in many ways. I'm like, where I can't sleep at night because I've read this. I'm like, how did I not know this? This is like evil incarnate, like what has been done to certain people in this country. And I I'm paralyzed many a times. I'm like, I don't know what to do, but I'm going to keep reading and learning. And as I've read and learned, I've become more comfortable talking to people with different perspectives than me. And that has enriched my life. One of the books I just got done reading is called The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James H. Cone. Mm-hmm. And he, again, I didn't know anything about lynching history in the United States. I do now. It's a great read. It's one of the most beautiful books I've read this year. And it's really good. I'll never think of the cross the same because of that perspective. I don't have that history in my culture, in who I am, but because I'm able to listen to this painful history of another group of people, I can understand Jesus better, and I can understand his love better. And so there is a great payoff for how hard it is to learn some things sometimes. And I can't encourage y'all enough about to go out and learn. That's what this podcast is all about, is loving beyond your lines, loving beyond your current perspective, loving beyond your worldview. And you don't have to change everything about yourself. I know there's some things where it might be a piece of yourself has to go, but maybe that's a piece that God wanted you to get rid of anyways.
Yeah.
And so it's painful, but it's good. It's so good. And I think it's the way Jesus wants us to live. And the world's watching. The world's watching. And we're the only piece of Jesus, or sometimes the only Jesus that people get to see sometimes is us. Yeah. So I'm talking to the Christians out there. I'm assuming most of the people who are watching this are Christians. Yeah. And so go be Jesus to people and hear them and listen to them. And I'm so thankful for this podcast. I'm thankful for you guys.
Yeah. Thankful. Yeah.
I'm thankful to be a listener. So I just encourage y'all to be listeners too.
Yeah.
I second that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's it for today's episode of Beyond the Lines. You can check out Central Christian Church is where we record. You can check us out at centralaz.com if you're in the Valley. You can also watch some of our live online services as well. You can find me in the chat. I'm usually there. I might not be when you're there. I don't know at this rate. But yeah. Also, if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, go check out the video version of this podcast. I have 3 cameras running in here for some reason, and if you're not checking it out, I don't know. It's kind of fun to see our faces. I look great.
Maybe.
No, maybe I don't know.
Maybe.
But you can help our YouTube channel out a ton by subscribing, and also if you have anything, that's right now we don't really have any other social media. So if you have a comment about today's episode, you want to share something you've learned this year, go comment on our YouTube. If you're on our YouTube right now, hi, glad you're there. Give us a comment about what you've learned this year and what you're learning. Until then, that's all I got today. Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks,
guys.
Go love beyond your lines.
Yeah.